Some cars don't just grow old. They linger in the corners of American memory, waiting for a man to stumble across them the way he might find an old photograph in a drawer he hasn't opened in years. The 1954 Buick Special is one of those quiet ghosts, the kind that steps forward not with a roar, but with a soft nod from another time. Picture a still summer morning in mid-century America. Trimmed lawns, sun-warmed pavement, and a Buick easing out of a driveway with the steady confidence only post-war steel could carry. Buick wasn't chasing flash or swagger that year. They were chasing something simpler: dignity, honesty, a sense of pride a working man could afford without apology. And beneath that intention, calm as a heartbeat, the '54 Special emerged from Detroit's hands like a bridge between what America had been and what it was about to become. To understand why the 1954 Buick Special mattered, you have to step back into the world that shaped it. A world where America was catching its breath after years of ration books, war bonds, and quiet resilience. By the early 50s, the nation was stretching its legs again. New highways were carving across farm country, suburbs were growing like fresh paint on a blank canvas, and Saturday evenings glowed with neon from corner diners where Buicks, Chevrolets, and Fords lined up like proud sentinels of a confident new era. Buick had long been the gentleman of General Motors, respectable, polished, a car for the man who wore his best hat even on ordinary days. But the market was shifting beneath Detroit's boots. Younger families were buying their first new vehicles. Veterans returning home now had careers, mortgages, and children. They wanted cars that looked modern, carried status without arrogance, and felt like a reward for years of sacrifice. Buick knew the old formula wouldn't hold much longer. So the 1954 Special became a quiet revolution. Designers shaped its body with restraint but intention. The fenders were smoother, cleaner, with just enough curvature to catch the morning sun without shouting for attention. The grille, with its signature Buick toothwork softened for that year, projected confidence without aggression. You could spot one from half a block away, not because it demanded the eye, but because it carried itself the way a seasoned craftsman carries his tools: steady, deliberate, sure. Under the hood lived the Fireball Straight 8, a long-stroke engine whose personality was built on smoothness rather than raw power. It didn't leap, it unfurled. When you pressed the accelerator, the car didn't surge forward. It glided with the patient rise of a baritone clearing his throat. This was the engine that had carried Buick through the pre-war years, refined through countless iterations until it delivered a kind of mechanical grace that modern drivers rarely witness. And then there was Dynaflow. Critics back then argued it was too slow to shift, too soft off the line. But those who drove Buicks understood its purpose. Dynaflow wasn't built for drag strips, it was built for long American miles. No jolts, no gear changes you could feel. Just one continuous, velvety sweep of power from driveway to open highway. Older men who climbed behind that wheel felt something familiar: steadiness, predictability, a sense of quiet control. Inside, the Buick Special felt like a living room on wheels. Broad benches wrapped in durable fabrics or soft vinyl, thick carpeting underfoot, and chrome trim that reflected the soft green glow of the instrument panel at night. The dashboard curved gently around the driver, not enclosing him, but guiding his hand from switch to lever, with the kind of logic only mid-century engineers seemed to understand. There was no wasted space, no cheap shortcuts. Even the knobs felt weighted, as if the designers believed a man deserved tactile dignity in the smallest details. And here's the truth most people forget. The Special wasn't meant to be flashy. Buick saved that for the Super and Roadmaster. The Special was the everyman's gateway into the brand. A car for the machinist, the shop foreman, the small business owner who wanted something better than a Chevrolet but didn't need the extravagance of Cadillac chrome. Dealers loved selling it because it made customers feel like they were stepping into a higher world without overreaching their means. By the end of 1954, the Special had become a familiar sight in towns from Ohio to Oregon. It carried newlywed couples to their first apartments. It hauled lumber for weekend projects. It ferried families to church on Sundays and teenagers to drive-ins on warm July nights. It wasn't a superstar in the automotive world. It was a companion, steady and uncomplaining. But beneath all that popularity, a quiet tension brewed. The industry was evolving faster than anyone expected. New technology was at the doorstep. V8 engines were rising like a coming tide. And though the 54 Special stood proud, it would soon find itself caught between two worlds, one fading, one roaring toward the horizon. By 1955, the world around the Special shifted with remarkable speed. Buick unveiled its first modern V8, a short-stroke powerhouse that changed the way drivers expected a car to feel. Acceleration sharpened, styling grew louder, bolder, dressed in deeper chrome and brighter color schemes. The tail-fin age was stirring, and America wanted spectacle. In the middle of that rising wave, the 54 Special, calm, measured, dignified, suddenly felt like the last quiet voice in a room that had decided to shout. Owners continued to drive them faithfully, but collectors, enthusiasts, and even Buick itself began celebrating the flashier years that followed. The Special of 55 and the iconic 57 models stole the spotlight, and the 1954, it slipped between the lines, overshadowed not by flaws, but by the sheer momentum of the era behind it. By the mid-1960s, as muscle cars roared onto the scene and compact imports seeped into American driveways, the 54 Special found itself out of step with the times. Its straight eight, once praised for its smooth reliability, now seemed like the relic of a slower generation. Many were traded in, scrapped for steel, or pushed behind barns where tall grass slowly reached around their tires. They didn't vanish dramatically, they simply faded, one quiet engine at a time. Yet a few survived, preserved not by collectors chasing value, but by men who had woven the Buick into the fabric of their lives. One such man was a retired Navy electrician named Walter Briggs from eastern Pennsylvania. He bought his 54 Special second-hand in 1958, Dover white and Gulf turquoise, bench seats worn smooth from years of use. He used it to drive his newborn daughter home from the hospital, to commute through winter storms, to take long summer trips down two-lane roads that cut through farmland and old mill towns. Walter was the type who maintained everything he owned with quiet devotion. His workshop smelled of oil, sawdust, and pipe tobacco, and the Buick lived there like a trusted companion. Neighbors would watch him on Saturday mornings, sleeves rolled up, polishing the chrome until it gleamed like a mirror. He didn't keep the car because it was valuable. He kept it because it held his years. Because every scratch had a story. Because every mile carried someone he loved. When Walter passed in the early 90s, his daughter inherited the Buick. She didn't drive it, didn't want to change a thing. She kept it under a canvas cover in the garage, occasionally lifting a corner just to run her hand along the fender, as if greeting an old friend of her father's. And there it remained, preserved by affection rather than restoration. Stories like Walter's were rare, but not unique. Across the country, a scattered handful of 54 Specials survived, because one man, usually someone who had fought hard to build a stable life, chose loyalty over novelty. The car meant something to him. It represented a promise he made to himself, or a moment in his life too precious to abandon. But these exceptions only underline the truth. By the 1980s, the 1954 Buick Special had become nearly invisible. Not legendary enough to draw crowds, not exotic enough to command high prices, not flashy enough to grace magazine covers. Even automotive historians often spoke of it only in passing, acknowledging it mainly as the final curtain of Buick's long, straight eight tradition. And yet, when one appears today, behind a collapsing barn door, under a dusty tarp in a forgotten garage, or idling proudly at a small-town car show, it feels like sighting a ghost that refuses to leave history behind. The lines, the stance, the quiet dignity, they whisper remnants of an America that knew how to value the steady over the sensational. The disappearance of the 54 Special wasn't a tragedy. It was a gentle fading, a drifting into the archives of memory. But like all things that fade, it left a shape behind, a silhouette, a soft echo. When you stand before a 1954 Buick Special today, whether its paint still glows like it did on that first summer morning, or it sits weathered beneath dust and peeling lacquer, you feel something different than you do with most mid-century machines. You feel the weight of a moment in American history when craftsmanship still carried a kind of quiet humility, when engineers built with intention rather than spectacle, and when a car's worth was measured not by how fast it shouted down a highway, but by how faithfully it carried a family through the years. Most cars from the 1950s tell stories of chrome excess and horsepower bravado. But the 1954 Special tells a softer story, the final chapter of Buick's straight eight era, the last breath before Detroit rushed into the booming, color-splashed years that would come to define mid-century motoring. This car stood between two Americas, one shaped by patience, routine, and post-war steadiness, and another eager for flash, speed, and the promise of a brighter, louder tomorrow. Step close to one, and the details begin to unfold like pages in an old family album. The broad hood stretching outward as if guiding the road ahead. The gentle curve of the fenders, shaped before tail fins and fashion, overtook sensibility. The soft glow of the instrument panel at dusk, casting a warm green halo across the cabin. These touches weren't designed to impress. They were designed to endure. And maybe that's why the men who owned these cars never forgot them. A Buick like this wasn't disposable. It wasn't a phase. It was part of the home, as familiar as the squeak of the screen door or the ticking of the kitchen clock. Long after the V8 craze stormed across the nation, long after magazines stopped printing ads for smooth-riding family sedans, the 54 Special remained quietly loyal. Even today, when one fires up and that straight eight settles into its dignified, velvety idle, you can almost hear the echoes of a country finding its footing after hardship, steady hands, honest work, and the belief that the road ahead would always lead somewhere better. This is why the eye tells these stories, because cars like the 54 Special don't survive on rarity or fame. They survive on memory, on the recollections of men who rode to their first jobs behind its wheel, on the stories of fathers who drove theirs until the odometer rolled so far it felt like part of the family, on the sons who watched from the passenger seat as the world outside changed year by year. But the Buick never did. And so the question becomes, where does your story fit among these? Maybe your father owned one. Glacier blue, stripped of options, with the straight eight that never complained. Maybe you learned to drive in one, on a gravel road behind your grandfather's farm. Maybe you haven't seen a 54 Special in decades, but the memory still sits somewhere in the back of your mind, like a warmth you can't quite name. Or perhaps you've got one tucked away in a garage right now, waiting for the day you'll give it back its voice. If the 54 Special has touched your life in any way, this is the place to share it. Put your memory alongside the others. Let the story continue. These machines survive not because of metal and bolts, but because people carry them forward through their recollections. And if this tale stirred something, if it brought back the sound of gravel under wide white walls or the smell of warm vinyl on a summer night, then stay close to this archive. There are more stories waiting in dark barns and quiet garages. More ghosts of American steel that deserve their moment in the light again. Add your voice. Keep the memory alive. Help preserve the heartbeat of the machines that once carried us through the most hopeful miles of the American century.